Thank you so much to our hosts over the last 2 days. It's been amazing. And as we reach the end, sadly, of the Latitude 59 stage program, I guess we kind of look back towards the beginning. The opening show yesterday reminded us of the importance of imagining a better world together. And Latitude 59 CEO Lizzie Org reminded us of our responsibility to build that world together, not just to imagine it. And I'm very pleased to be joined by 3 inspiring young people from the Baltic and Nordic region who are doing exactly that already, even while they're still studying. So I'm joined by Tiffany Toisk, who is a student at Estonian Business School and is involved in Wave Ventures, which is a student-run Gen Z investment fund. Joined by Katariina Kordemets, who is a master's student at Tartu University and is involved in Creator Fund, which is a university-oriented investment fund. And by Markku Voutilainen, who is a master's student at Aalto University in Finland. He's a co-founder of a startup that is very secret and we can't talk about. And he's also an angel scout for Excel Partners. So I used to work in universities and I spent a long time studying in them. I certainly wasn't investing while I was still a student. So I'm very inspired by what all 3 of you are doing. And I thought I would ask you first a very big picture question. And Tiffany, we might start with you, which is, what is the impact you want to have on the world?
Yeah, well, a positive one. As you said, it's definitely not the obvious choice. I mean, building something, being a volunteer. Actually, I was a volunteer last year, Latitude. Being parent, recycling. But for me, it's VC investing is definitely one of the best options to do it. I mean, it's so amazing. It's basically you can just accelerate the world, the future world you want to see come to life. It's really beautiful.
And what is that future world that you want? What do you want it to look like?
How much time do we have? But yeah, let's touch about that in it's a little longer discussion.
Okay, Katariina, what is the impact that you want to have on the world? What change do you want to make?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, I would love to have an impact on the deep tech ecosystem of Estonia and more broadly Europe. So I get to do that thanks to my job at the VC. And besides that, I would also love to start something of my own. So as now I'm gaining experience to do exactly that. So then I would love to start my own company using biotechnology, which is my background, to solve a real problem in the world. So basically, this is giving me the skills to do exactly that.
Markku, you have already started founding your own company, but on a more big picture level, what is the impact you want to have on the world?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And it's good to see everyone here as well. And thanks to Kai from the program team for having youngsters on stage as well. I think for the impact side, it's clear for me that you want to create impact, but then enable impact. Creating is building, and then enabling is investing. And in both of these cases, it's about understanding the observation that innovation has stagnated. So Peter Thiel said it really well. We stopped innovating in atoms in the 1970s, and since then we've been innovating in bits. So computers and all of that, which is great, but humanity isn't really improving forward. And I think innovation in atoms is what I'm really curious about. So deep tech and seeing all of that. I think we need to stop pumping more money. We need to start pumping more money into deep tech and thinking about how we can improve humanity. I think that's the big picture there.
I think I really agree with Marko. And I think it's not just about money. We can't just pour money in and then hope that something will magically happen. I think we also have to educate those people and help researchers use the things that they do in the lab to build a real company, because it's completely different. And especially, I would love to see more PhDs start companies. I think that's what I would love to actually, achieve.
Marko, you mentioned there the idea that innovation has stagnated, and a lot of the big tech companies that have been successful in the last number of years are quite different from the kind of deep tech that you and Katariina were just talking about there. When you look at the world as it is now and the people who are in positions of power in finance and tech, What do you think about the world that they have built and the world that they oversee? Do you think they are doing a good job, that they have done a good job? Do you think that your generation would like to follow in their footsteps, or do you feel that there are differences in how you look at the world?
Chris already knows my opinion on this. But yeah, it's provocative. I think if you follow me on LinkedIn, you know I had a rant about this earlier this week. I think the reason our startup ecosystem has shifted towards greener, impactful, and climate tech in general is because the older generations failed us. I think that's very clear. Economic growth at a macro level came from unsustainable practices, and it came from sort of, we're now trying to play catch up, and we're trying to fix things that we broke when the economy was booming, right? And that was unsustainable. And I can say that I feel slight resentment to the older generation because of that. But I'm still tremendously optimistic and bullish on our future because of the younger generation. The younger generation has been very clear in being activistic. They're showing that their morals and values do matter. And I think there is a correction that we need to make in society as well, and sort of understand that Gen Z isn't really lazy, as we tend to see in the news. They're just very selective, and they're sort of they choose what they want to work on. So if you have a company that's not attracting Gen Z, I'd look in the mirror at that point. It's more about you and not about them. And I think that just sort of summarizes the point there.
Tiffany, I wonder if I could ask you about the relationship between generations, because Marco was saying there about this feeling that maybe previous generations have failed young people, especially when we look at something like the climate crisis, which we have seen students in schools and universities all around the world having strikes and protests and so on, and a real generational divide there. How do you relate to older generations when you're talking about the world that you want to build, given the problems that we see?
Definitely. Well, to this point, I have a really positive experience. I mean, look at yesterday's talk, right? What Triin Kass was doing with the manifesto. I mean, such wonderful work and such activism, and you don't need to be like Gen Z to do these sorts of things. I mean, my role models, it's not Elon Musk, it's definitely not Warren Buffett, it's people like Kadi Ruusalep or Sten Tamkivi or Triin Hertman. So I definitely think that we do have these people in our ecosystem who aren't like the younger generation, but they're doing really amazing stuff, and I think we would move a lot better and faster if we just combine forces, in a sense that I see the resentment part of it, but how to move forwards, and do you think if we can make those people not kind of come to our side but start discussion? So
Katharina, I wonder if I could ask you about that, because you're a scientific researcher. You mentioned that you wanted to see more people with PhDs who are in a research background involved in business and so on. I mean, research is a collaborative activity, right? Especially in the sciences. It involves researchers of different ages, different career stages and stuff. How do you balance that when deep tech is kind of this, new frontier in some ways in terms of innovation? How do you deal with people from different generations working together, and do they have different attitudes to that?
So first of all, I think we could go on for 2 hours at least about the problems in academia. I think it's especially present in there. So I think that's also another reason why more and more people might go into startups, because it's not, the hierarchy isn't so strong there. So I really hope to see that maybe that can also change the research world, to have actual leadership skills among the people who lead teams or even universities. So I'm a bit critical in that sense, that I haven't seen a lot of that in academia, and I think more and more people are disappointed in it. So we don't see, maybe that's why we don't see that many people doing a PhD nowadays. And I think we should involve more young people in the decision making, especially in those places.
But there are programs to incorporate business side into the PhD. Do you think those are working?
What type of programs exactly?
teaduse aesthetics.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you see that making a change, or?
No, absolutely. There are a lot of different stakeholders who are all trying to, make it easier for research ideas to be turned into businesses, but it needs a lot of specific skills that a lot of researchers don't have. And I'm hoping that the younger generation will grow up with the idea that they might start a business, so they will start looking towards that in an earlier stage in life so they can build up the commercial skill set that I think someone that has worked as a professor for like 30 years might not have. But that being said, they can also learn that. We have had really good examples of professors like Arvi Jões starting a company.
Marco, Katarina and Tiffany both mentioned some of the positive role models from different generations, but like we don't have to engage in any defamation on stage for people to think of the bad role models that we see in positions of power in big companies and the kind of, conspiracy theories, cage fights, like lots of very crazy things that they are perhaps prioritizing. Do you feel that there is kind of a values debate going on about what kind of priorities we should have in business? I'm thinking a lot about something that was mentioned in the female founders meetup last night about the allyship manifesto, which was that a couple of years ago we had a lot of discussions about including ESG factors in investments as a priority. In the last 3 or 4 years, we have seen a huge backlash against that, especially in the United States, and a return to a kind of attitude of, greed is good, and the only thing that matters is to make money. As a young startup founder and somebody who is involved as well in terms of scouting potential investments, do you feel that there is a disconnect in values here between different generations?
Short answer, I think it's sort of, if I was to compare an older generation person to a younger generation person, these two individuals grew up in different worlds. When they were growing up, the world looked very different. It was all going up, making more money. You could buy a house when you were 18. You can't do that now. When you were the older generation, when they graduated, they got a good job immediately. You don't have that now. Back then, climate was a factor, but it wasn't ruined as bad as it is now. And I think because the world is so different, and because we've grown up in different worlds, there is bound to be a difference in values. There is bound to be a clearer shift to climate in the younger generation than there was in the previous one. There's a clear shift to sustainability, which was not there in the older generation. I think that was the generation of growth and economic growth, but I think it was done unsustainably, and then now we're trying to patch up for it. Figure out ways to still get economic growth, because that does help the world. And I think in an ideal world, we'd do that in such a manner where the disparity between regions wouldn't be so clear. So developing countries would catch up to developed countries without there being such a hurdle. And I think all of that would be great. And I think that is something that younger generations have. I'm not saying older generations don't have it, but they just grew up in a world where it was very clearly a different mindset. And shifting that mindset into, okay, we're in a new world now, might take constant dialogue or activism from students, or constant sort of media outlets portraying these activistic tendencies in universities and wherever. So anytime you see Gen Z saying an opinion, don't get mad at them, listen to them. I think that's only good, and that's how we get the dialogue further.
Katarina, in universities, I suppose there is a big divide in terms of priorities between research and research that has any kind of business orientation, right? I mean, there's a difference between pursuing research just for the pursuit of knowledge, wherever it takes you, and pursuing research that is designed, to create maybe a product or a solution, or, at some level to get a return on investment. How do you feel that as researchers you deal with that values and priority difference in terms of how it affects your work?
I think actually most of the research isn't done by having some sort of a business goal in mind. So usually you have a research group just doing the science for the science sake, and then sometimes they find something that they think, okay, maybe we can do something with this. So usually, you would have it the other way around. You have a problem and then you find a solution, but oftentimes science doesn't really work like that. You might have, maybe you want to solve a specific problem, but most of the time you just do science and then you find something and then you start to think about how can I apply this? So I think now that's exactly where we need to help them to realize that and to, help them sell it as well, because you can't really make a difference inside of the lab. But in terms of values, I think that maybe, as I mentioned, in academia, I think a lot of things are broken in terms of who decides everything. So it's the older generation, oftentimes older men, let's be realistic, and you can't really, it's really difficult to change that because it has very specific, like a hierarchy, or like you have to go all those steps, through all those steps, which takes like years and years and years. And to change that is really, really difficult. And obviously I don't have a good solution like at this point. So, but there's maybe, like I can see that specific clash of values per se. I think it's more towards like who has the influence and who can make the important decisions. That I also see, like not just in academia, obviously. It's also the ones who are giving out money, and like in terms of VC, that can be a problem as well.
Yeah, that's one thing that was discussed. Tiffany, you mentioned the allyship manifesto that was launched on the stage yesterday, about the importance of governance at different levels, like in terms of running companies, hiring, as Katarina mentioned, deciding how to invest and where to invest. I mean, in an industry where, as Katarina mentioned, both finance and tech have a problem with older white men being overwhelmingly in charge of a lot of those levers of money and power and governance. As a young woman, how do you feel going into a career in that? Do you feel, you want to shake it up and burn it down, or does it make you feel, wary of the sector that you're going into?
Well, I think I'm really, really privileged to be in Estonia right now, where I'm empowered to give back because people before me gave back. So to your point of the generational clash, and that you said that we grew in like such different times and spaces, I think right now we're seeing, especially in America, like the symptoms of really late capitalism and like the overproductive and being really obsessed with financial gain. And I really hope that in the next generation we will see, okay, America, you're 20 years ahead of us, that we won't follow their footsteps, and we will start prioritizing really health and life, which is finite, not like money. Well, they do keep printing money, but it's not infinite, so yes.
On that political point about the idea of like, prioritizing making money versus social justice, more equality, things like that. Marco, how do you feel that investors that in the future are going to deal with this big question that this backlash against ESG factors that I mentioned in the US has focused on, which is, a lot of, let's be frank, white male right-wing politicians saying the priority for any investor in any business should be to maximize the return, make the most money, not be, quote unquote, woke or trying to have a social impact. Do you think that investors can start to say, no, we are willing to invest in something that has a lower return because it has a better impact on society or it's more sustainable? Or am I living in a kind of, very idealistic possible future there?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think there's more depth to the question than that you can see just in general basics. For a startup to get investment, it requires a VC who has capital. For that VC to have capital and make those decisions of what to invest into, whether it be ESG or anything else, they need to gather money from limited partners. So these are the individuals who then give the money to VCs and they deploy it. I would challenge LPs, so limited partners, so this is institutionals or endowments or whatever it may be, for these individuals and entities to start thinking about ESG a lot more. I think it's a cop-out for them to invest billions into VC market and then lift their hands, and then for the entire sector to blame the VCs for how they're deploying it. I think the limited partners, when they're making those investments, they should be more choosy into what they're investing into and what the fund terms are when they're investing into that. I think that makes more sense, because now we're copying out the middle person when in reality it's where the actual capital is, and that's with the limited partners. And I think that is a challenge that we should see in the world. And I'm pretty sure we are going to see that, because this isn't really something basic individuals in society understand, but it's becoming more basic knowledge. And once that becomes basic knowledge, more individuals can challenge the status quo. And if that is status quo, we will see change in that as well.
Do you think that that comes from social and political pressure from below, or do you think that we need to see more action from decision makers, maybe at the governmental level, to encourage investors, to encourage people with capital, that we are not simply encouraging an economy that pursues growth at the expense of everything else?
You could go that way. What I'd like to see is younger people in really high impact leadership positions making decisions that change the needle. I think for most of these endowments, if you do look at the people in charge, they tend to be on the latter end of the earlier generation. And that's fine. They've had a career in finance, whatever it is. Maybe they run a family office. Fantastic. Happy for them. But as long as they do not bring in younger generations, their allocation strategy for deploying capital into different funds is always going to be what they think is best in the world that they grew up in. So I think the best mix would be to bring in younger generations into these LPs as well, in the LP offices, and just help them understand that, hey, the world today is different than it was back then. You can make returns. We just need to actually look at these different places of investment in general.
Tiffany, being involved in an investment fund that is student-run and generationally focused, how do you feel about that? Do you feel that there needs to be more support for the people who are maybe making the individual decisions about from where the money is coming from? And do you think that having a fund where you and all of your colleagues are students and from a younger generation, do you feel you will have a different values and priority set than, say, other investors will?
Yeah. Maybe one pattern I've seen is the excitement when I talk to other investors, particularly or older investors, is maybe not that big of a level of excitement when it comes to something ESG related and not led by financial gains. I don't know, maybe they were just not excited to talk to me on that particular day, but that's a pattern that I've noticed. And back to the question you first asked, Marco, I'd just like to add that I also see it's a kind of a privilege to invest into ESGs as an LP or as a VC, because you kind of have to have that FU money, that you're not dependent on the LP satisfaction or dissatisfaction with your returns. But also Marco touched upon that point that it stems also from changing the LPs, like from the root down, from the root up. So, yeah.
That idea of excitement is one that I think is very interesting, because, I would have thought there's very little more exciting than saving the world from environmental catastrophe in comparison to, a new app that does whatever. Not that apps aren't great. But Katarina, from the deep tech side, as somebody who is on both sides of the investment and the research, do you feel that the research in deep tech is going in a direction that is more about trying to, broadly conceived, to save the world or improve things? Or do you think it's maybe moving in a direction that is more about creating products that can make money? Which direction do you see deep tech going in?
First of all, I think what Marco said makes a lot of sense. You can't really expect VCs to just go out and now make investments based on our own values or impact, because realistically, we would love that, but it's not our money. We can't just go around giving it to whoever we want. I think that's why angels are good for smaller projects that might not bring in that much money. So yeah, we need to change that on another level. And I do think if a VC wants to have a bigger impact, then deep tech is exactly where they should be. Because if a research project finds that application, then quite often those are really big problems that they are solving. It's not going to be another app. It is going to be something bigger. So I think deep tech does have the answers to a lot of the really important problems that we are currently facing. So yeah, I do have a lot of faith in that. And most of the time, as I said, science is being done for the sake of science. So now it's up to us to see how it's being applied.
As we come towards our last few minutes, I want to touch on that idea of solving the problems that we see, because sometimes, so many people have said to me in recent days, oh, you're a journalist, I don't want to even watch the news anymore because it's too depressing. Everything is war, terrible things happening all over the world. Obviously, the climate crisis is sort of so vast and terrifying that sometimes it's difficult for us to even grasp that we're dealing with something existential for our whole species and society. But burying our heads in the sand isn't going to get us anywhere, is it? So I wonder if I could ask all of you as a final question, if you wanted to see one big change over the next 10 years in the world, if you could wave a magic wand and do it, what would that one big change be? And it can be either in the field you're working in yourself, because hopefully then you'll actually be able to go and do it, but it can also be something that you hope more broadly is an inspiration for the people who are able to make those decisions, who can make it happen. Marco, I wonder if I could start with you.
One big wand. I grew up in Kenya and Tanzania, so in East Africa. I spent 10 years growing up there. And I think a lot of what we see in Europe, in Nordics, in the Baltics, we're very privileged when we start looking at the larger human population. And if I could wave a wand and fix something, it would be the disparity between developing and developed regions. It's not an easy task. Developed regions and countries were able to go through an industrial period where they could pollute their hearts out, and they could go through that, where now developed countries have put in place blockers that developing countries cannot use cheap fuel to be industrialized and get developed. So it's like a chokehold that we have, which is insane in my opinion. So I think if I could wave a wand, I'd get rid of that chokehold, and I'd love to see that the entire human population is in a developed region, because it's a lottery that we were born in Finland or Estonia or wherever in the Western Hemisphere. I'd love to see that change happen. Is that through deep tech or investments? I don't know, but I'd love to see that change happen.
I suppose it's one of the most fundamental injustices and inequalities in our world that the West kind of pulled the ladder up after ourselves after we, messed up the planet getting rich. Katarina, if you could wave the magic wand, and I guess as a research scientist, you may actually be able to wave the magic wand depending on what your research turns up at. What would the big change you want to see be?
So first of all, I would like to recommend a book that's called Factfulness, just to end on a positive note. Not everything is getting worse. Not the whole world is constantly getting worse. I think it's important. We have to solve problems, but we can't be depressed while we're doing it. We don't have to be. There are things that have gotten better over the years. Just to make that point, not everything is all bad. But I think I would like to see more of a collaboration between deep tech and startups or companies. So I would love to see a lot more deep tech unicorns. I would love to see an Estonian deep tech unicorn, and then those founders give back to the ecosystem. We get more and more deep tech startups. So it's not just about one specific startup solving a problem, but we would have more and more research actually getting applied and not just staying somewhere in the lab where no one really touches it. So that would be my one big issue, that if I could solve like this, then I would, because I think that would solve many other things besides. It's not just one problem, but it's more like the tools.
Yeah, that idea of changing our mindset, but then also creating change that enables more change, which is kind of the revolutionary way that we hope things will change.
Exactly.
Tiffany, you're the youngest, so I'm going to give you the final word of your big change, and it can be as big as you want or as small as you want.
I think that was awesome KPI of the new deep tech unicorn in Estonia. But the next generation, so I hope that if my daughter or my child was up here on this really soft, comfortable sofa, subjects like diversity, it wouldn't be something that they would be up here stage talking about. It would be something like we see Stone Age people, but I definitely want the next generation to be just as and even more more activistic, is that the word, than we are right now. So, yeah.
That's a very inspiring note to end on. And in terms of saying about, hoping that we don't see people on stages having to talk about things like either the climate crisis or gender inequality, racial inequality, the inequality of those things, it's inspiring to see people who want to change those things in the world. It's also been very inspiring over the last couple of days to see the Latitude 59 team putting those issues on stages, because those conversations are not always highlighted or emphasized at business and tech conferences, because they aren't always comfortable conversations for people who are maybe in positions of power and authority, but it's been wonderful to see issues of diversity, equality, allyship, and an inspiring and better future, and how we can build that together, highlighted on the Latitude 59 stage over the last 2 days. Thank you so much to Marco, to Katarina, and to Tiffany for joining me. Thank you all for coming to listen to us. And I think we're all very excited for the finals of the pitch competition, which will be coming up now. And thank you as well to all of the Latitude 59 team, not only for the inspiring topics and message that the conference has spread, but also for all of their hard work over the last 2 days, making this a wonderful experience for us all. So thank you very much.